Hi everyone, I've just made this video on the principles of tendon rehabilitation in a runner. It is based on a blog that I wrote about 8 months ago, and the title of the blog was Load, Skip and Go. Now let's kick it off by looking at matching the type of exercise load to the pain that the runner in front of you is presenting with. And of course there's a lot of debate as to whether isometrics are in fact useful in lower limb tendon rehabilitation. But for me it's more important to discuss when I would choose to use an isometric exercise rather than to discuss whether they work in everybody presenting with tendinopathy. So when are isometrics helpful in a runner? Well, I think if a runner has stopped running as a result of the tendinopathy, then that is clearly an indication that they're unable to tolerate the loads of running. And they may well not be able to tolerate the loads of something like heavy, slow resistance training, for example. And those are the scenarios where isometric exercises may be a starting point for the rehabilitation. So what about a runner who's continued to run despite having had symptoms of tendinopathy? Well, for them, isometrics just won't make the cut. And this is where a heavy, slow resistance training program can be really helpful. The basic principle here is to load the muscle tendon unit at 15 repetition max at week 1 and progress on to 6 repetition max over a 12-week period. There is good evidence for using a program like this in treating tendinopathy. But we also need to educate the runners that after an exercise program like this, some pain can be provoked, and if we tell them that pain to the order of 4 or 5 out of 10 is acceptable in this sort of a scenario as long as it settles within the next 24 hours. Now the next thing we need to address is the rate of force development, and this is based on some really good work that was published in 2019 by McAuliffe et al., which was a systematic review and looked at Achilles tendinopathy primarily, and they found significant impairments in reactive, maximal and explosive strength in people with Achilles tendinopathy. So moving on from the heavy slow resistance program, it may be useful to introduce exercises that emphasize on faster concentric contractions as a stepping stone to plyometrics. Now the next phase is plyometric training, of course. Now to fully understand the need for plyometric training during tendon rehabilitation in a runner, one needs to consider the differences in load based on the type of activity that's being performed. And the data we have so far shows that when you subject the Achilles tendon, for example, to an eccentric or a heavy slow resistance training, you impose 3 to 3.5 times the body weight on the tendon. But when you run, we subject the Achilles to around 8 times body weight, and plyometric training can probably help us bridge that gap between strength training and running. Now, very few runners will stop running as a result of tendinopathy. So the question here really isn't about returning to run, it's more about how can you manage the load of running alongside the rehabilitation program. The decision on when and how to fit running in with rehabilitation is based on the work by Magnuson et al. In 2010, and the collagen net synthesis curve that was published by Magnuson et al. Is very much the basis of my recommendation here, and that is to fit in the rehabilitation exercises on the same day as completing the run, assuming that the individual only runs 3 times a week. And this also means that the tendon is also loaded when the net synthesis is in the positive. So there we have it. Load, skip and go. Thank you for listening.